Alright, let's see. Alright. Ooh, coffee looks organic. That's good. No, not
Brands on brands on brands. Save 20 to 60% off other retailers' prices at Ross.
This is your brain when you're struggling to focus.
Stop.
When you're in the zone.
Okay. Sheesh. Okay, that was unnecessarily loud. Okay. Until anyone comes, I can put it louder. Almost ready. Let's see. Over here. Remove that. Oh, I forgot to zoom in my model. Let's see. Alright. See, I have the book chat on. And we go over here. Let's try this. Ah! Oh no! Wait, let's see. How do I put my model on top of this? Ah! Oh, wow. Alright. There we go. How you doing? How's the music? Is it too soft or too loud or just right? I'm good. Just wanted to get the streaming done early today. I say early, but it's like noon for me, but I wanted to sleep in, so. I'm also trying to drink as much as I can for my throat today, so I can read better. Meaty sleep, yep. So what you been up to today, Pyro? Well, yeah, we'll do like I did yesterday. I'm like 20 minutes into stream and then get to reading. And then I'll do the writing, I guess, that I keep putting off. Nothing much, just playing the new Call of Duty game while I wait. Oh, nice. How is it? Ow. It's pretty good. I'm glad you're back. Yeah. Thank you. I really wish I could do something though other than just this standing here technically. It's like, phone, let me do something. Oh yeah, last night I dreamed that aliens were following me in the woods, and like they were trying to tell me something, but I was too scared to listen. And like everyone kept dying around me. It was weird. You're good enough. Think Pyro. That sounds a bit scary. Yeah, that's often my dreams though. Oh no, you're at work. I'm good. How about you other than work? That's okay though. I might stream a little longer than I did yesterday. I only read like 2 chapters yesterday, so I should read like at least 4 today. The stars don't need me doing too much for now. Oh, excuse me. Maybe. I want to do something else. Like, it's like, at least let me play Minecraft, phone. It's before on my tablet got to where I couldn't download it for some reason. And then like now my phone I can download it if I want to, but it just won't run. It's like, So now I'm just here staring into your soul menacingly. You blow my nose. You'll have better stuff soon. Yeah, hopefully. Well, that'll be so cool, and I can like do art streams again. Well, then people will see my art hasn't really progressed from like a year or 2 ago. I say that though, and like looking at old art I made when I first started streaming, it's like, what the fuck? To be fair though, drawing on mobile with a finger is kind of hard. I see people like make these awesome like art with it and post it, but it's like, I don't know how. my finger is not very mobile. At least I made like that Iron Mouse drawing. That's about it. Lately, that's been good. And like I'm trying to work on Retro's PNG model, and I really need to work on that. I keep forgetting about it. But it's like when I'm making stuff for someone else, it's gotta be perfect. Ow, 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 ow. What the fuck? Ow. Ow, 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 ow. Fuck. Ugh. I wish I'd never got my ears pierced. If I don't put earrings in them, like they'll all just eventually, like in a couple of weeks, just fill with pus. And I pierced the back, and I was like, what, 14? So like 6 years ago, and I'm still dealing with this. Fuck. Ow. Ow, it's sore. Ow. Alright, so 4 minutes to go, and then I'll start reading. Frick, my ear! Ah, fuck. Bro, if I ever do get that computer, if I can actually play games on the stream. Oh, it's like crazy to think about. I can finally, because it'll have 8 gigabytes of RAM instead of 2, so hopefully I don't have to worry about it crashing every 5 minutes. Ugh. Alright, 3 minutes and I'll read the story. Alright. Gotta make sure my throat's lubed up before I start reading. Got the loop. Zook, I didn't know you were here. When did you get in here? Hi, Bam. Bam came in at the wrong time. I was just making a joke. I gotta drink as much as I can for my throat today. Yesterday, like, when I was trying to read, it felt like I was having to strain my voice. I don't know why. It wasn't like my throat was sore. It just felt really like, I don't know, kind of like tight, I guess. And it was just really hard to read. That's why my stream was so short for reading yesterday. The first legit the second. It's the streamer luck. What can I say? How you guys doing? I can't stay long. That's okay. I'm going to start reading anyway, so hopefully you can hear a chapter at least. They're pretty short. Just like this yesterday, they felt really long. Chocolate chip waffles. And you didn't give me any? You are mean. You are mean, my good sir. I thought we were friends. Ah. This is the worst for me getting sick. And I used to like never get sick. It is so weird. I feel like everyone's been getting sick though this year. They do call me Devilman. No, they do not. But yeah, it's like, I don't know, it seems like a lot of like people I watch or people I know, it's like everyone's just kind of getting sick this year. I don't know. It's just been that kind of year. Like even like my friends, they're like, would be like, oh hey, I'm about to, if I like check in on them after a while, they'd be like, oh hey, I'm just sick and stuff. It's like, what? I'm sick too. What is this? You get sick about every 4 months. Not during the summer. I had like bad flu, remember, like 4 different times. And then earlier this year, I remember like Luna was freaking out because she hadn't heard anything from me, and I was just like out of it completely. So people get sick now? Yeah, now for sure, but like earlier this year too, and I don't know, it was crazy. Alright, let's go to chapter 3 here. The wood between the worlds. Let me lube up my throat just one more time. Excuse me. Oh man. Chapter 3. The wood between the worlds. Whoa, lol. Yeah, I burped very loud. Sorry. Chapter 3. Uncle Andrew and his study vanished instantly. This is after Diggory took the ring because his uncle was pissing him off and he's trying to find his friend. They're out the ninja. Then for a moment, Everything became muddled. The next thing Diggory knew was that there was a soft green light coming down on him from above, and darkness below. He didn't seem to be standing on anything, or sitting, or laying. Nothing appeared to be touching him. I believe I'm in water, said Diggory, or underwater. This frightened him for a second, but almost at once he could feel that he was rushing upwards. Then his head suddenly came into the air, and he found himself scrambling ashore, out on a smooth, grassy ground at the edge of a pool. As he rose to his feet, he noticed that he was neither dripping nor panting for breath, as anyone would expect after being underwater. His clothes were perfectly dry. He was standing by the edge of a small pool, not more than 10 feet from side to side in the wood. The trees grew close together and were so leafy that he could not get a glimpse of the sky. All the light was green light that came through the leaves, but there must have been a very strong sun overhead, for this green daylight was bright and warm. It was the quietest wood you could possibly imagine. There were no birds or insects or animals and wind. You could almost feel the trees growing. The pool he had just got out of was not the only pool. There were dozens of others. A pool every few yards as far as his eyes could reach. You could almost feel the trees drinking the water up with their roots. This wood was very much alive. When he tried to describe it afterwards, Diggory always said it was a rich place, as rich as plum cake. The strangest thing was that, almost before he had looked about him, Diggory had half forgotten how he came here. At any rate, he was certainly not thinking about Polly or Uncle Andrew or even his mother. He was not in the least frightened or excited or curious. If anyone had asked him, "Where did you come from?" he would probably have said, "I've always been here." That was what it felt like, as if one had always been in that place and never been bored, although nothing had ever happened. As he said long afterwards, it's not the sort of place where things happen. The trees go on growing, that's all. After Diggory had looked at the wood for a long time, he noticed that there was a girl laying on her back at the foot of a tree a few yards away. Her eyes were nearly shut but not quite, as if she were just between sleeping and waking. So he looked at her for a long time and said nothing. And at last she opened her eyes and looked at him for a long time, and she also said nothing. Then she spoke, in a dreamy, contented sort of voice. "I think I've seen you before," she said. "I rather think so too," said Diggory. "Have you been here long?" "Oh, always," said the girl. "At least, I don't know, a very long time." "So have I," said Diggory. "No, you haven't," she said. "I've seen you come out of that pool." "Yes, I suppose I did," said Diggory with a puzzled air. "I've forgotten." Then for quite a long time neither said any more. "Look here," said the girl presently. "I wonder, did we ever really meet before? I have a sort of idea, a sort of picture in my head, of a boy and a girl like us, living somewhere quite different, and doing all sorts of things. Perhaps it was only a dream." "I had that same dream, I think," said Diggory, "about a boy and a girl living next door. Something about crawling among rafters. I remember the girl had a dirty face. Aren't you getting it mixed? In my dream it was the boy who had the dirty face." "I can't remember," said the boy's face, said Diggory, and added, "Hullo, what's that?" "Why, it's a guinea pig," said the girl, and it was a fat guinea pig, nosing about in the grass. But round the middle of the guinea pig there ran a tape, and tied on to it by the tape was a bright yellow ring. "Look, look," cried Diggory, "the ring, and look, you've got one on your finger, and so have I." The girl now sat up, really interested at last. They stared very hard at one another, trying to remember. And then, at exactly the same moment, she shouted, "Mr. Kettley!" And he shouted out, "Uncle Andrew!" And they knew who they were, and began to remember the whole story. After a few minutes' hard talking, they had got it straight. Diggory explained how beastly Uncle Andrew had been. "What do we do now?" said Polly. "Take the guinea pig and go home?" "There's no hurry," said Diggory, with a huge yawn. "I think there is," said Polly. "This place is too quiet. It's so dreamy. You're almost asleep. If we once give into it, we shall just lie down and drowse forever and ever." "It's very nice here," said Diggory. "Yes, it is," said Polly. but we've got to get back. She stood up and began to cautiously towards the guinea pig, but then she changed her mind. We might as well leave the guinea pig, she said. It's perfectly happy here, and your uncle will only do something horrid to it if we take it home. I bet he would, answered Diggory. Look at the way he treated us. By the way, how do we get home? Go back into the pool, I expect. They came and stood together at the edge, looking down into the smooth water. It was full of the reflection of the green leafy branches. They made it look very deep. I haven't any bathing things, said Polly. We shan't need them, silly, said Diggory. We're going in with our clothes on. Don't you remember it didn't wet us on the way up? Can you swim? A bit. Can you? Well, not much. I don't think we shall need to swim, said Diggory. We want to go down, don't we? Neither of them much liked the idea of jumping into the pool, but neither said so to the other. They took hands and said 1, 2, 3, go, and jumped. There was a great splash, and of course they closed their eyes. But when they opened them, it was hardly up to their ankles in water. On the dry ground. What on earth has gone wrong, said Polly in a frightened voice, but not quite so frightened as you might expect, because it's hard to feel really frightened in the wood. The place is too peaceful. Oh, I know, said Diggory. Of course it won't work. We're still wearing our yellow rings. They're for the outward journey, you know. The green ones take you home. We must change rings. Have you got pockets? Good. Put your yellow ring in your left. I've got 2 greens. Here's one for you. They put on their green rings and came back to the pool. But before they tried another jump, Diggory gave a long, "Oh, what's the matter?" said Polly. "I've just had a wonderful idea," said Diggory. What are all the other pools?" "How do you mean?" "Why, if we can get back to our own world by jumping into this pool, mightn't we get somewhere else by jumping into one of the others? Supposing there was a world at the bottom of every pool. But I thought we were already in your Uncle Andrew's other world, or other place, or whatever he called it. Didn't you say—" "Oh, bother Uncle Andrew," interrupted Diggory. "I don't believe he knows anything about it. He never had the pluck to come here himself. He only talked of the one other world. But suppose there were dozens." "You mean this wood might be only one of them?" "No, I don't believe this wood is a world at all. I think it's just a sort of in-between place." Polly looked puzzled. Don't you see?" said Diggory. "No, do listen. Think of our tunnel under the slates at home. It isn't a room in any of the houses. In a way, it isn't really part of any of the houses. Once you're in the tunnel, you can go along it and come to any of the houses in the row. Mightn't this wood be the same? A place that isn't in any of the woods, but once you've found that place, you can get into them all." "Well, even if we can," began Polly, but Diggory went on as if he hadn't heard her. "And of course that explains everything," he said. "That's why it's so quiet and sleepy here. Nothing ever happens here, like at home. It's in the houses that people talk and do things and have meals. Nothing goes on in the in-between places, between the walls and above the ceilings and under the floor, or in our own tunnel. But when you come out of our tunnel, you may find yourself in any house. I think we can get out of this place in a jolly well anywhere. We don't need to jump back into the same pool we came by, or not just yet." "The wood between the worlds," said Polly dreamily. "It sounds rather nice." "Come on," said Diggory. "Which pool shall we try?" "Look here," said Polly. "I'm not going to try any new pool till we've made sure that we can get back to the old one. We're not even sure it'll work yet." "Yes," said Diggory, "and get caught by Uncle Andrew, and have our rings taken away before we had any fun. No thanks." "Could we just go part of the way down into our old pool?" said Polly, "just to see if it works. Then if it does, we'll change our rings and come up again before we're really back into Mr. Kettlery's study." "Can we go part of the way down?" "Well, it took time coming up. I suppose it'll take a little time going back." What the fuck? Oh no. Did my screen crash? Ah! No, wait, maybe not. Oh, phew. I thought it crashed. Okay. Wait, what is that? Let's see what it was. Oh. Okay. "Well, it took time coming up. I suppose it'll take a little time going back. Diggory made rather a fuss about agreeing to this, but he had to in the end because Polly absolutely refused to do any exploring in new worlds until she had made sure about getting back to the old one. She was quite as brave as he about some dangers, wasps, for instance, but she was not so interested in finding out things nobody had ever heard before. For Diggory was the sort of person who wants to know everything, and when he grew up, he became the famous Professor Kirk who comes into other books. After a good deal of arguing, they agreed to put on their green rings. Green for safety, said Diggory, so you can't help remembering which is which, and hold hands and jump. But as soon as they seemed to be getting back to Uncle Andrew's study, or even in their own world, Polly was to shout change, and they would slip off their green rings and put on their yellows. Diggory wanted to be the one who shouted change, but Polly wouldn't agree. They put on the green rings, took hands, and once more shouted, 1, 2, 3, go. This time it worked. It was very hard to tell you what it felt like, for everything happened so quickly. At first there were bright lights moving about in the black sky. Diggory always thinks these were stars, and even swears he saw Jupiter quite close. Close enough to see its moon, but almost at once there were rows and rows of roofs and chimney pots about them, and they could see St. Paul's and knew they were looking at London, but you could see through the walls of all the houses. Then they could see Uncle Andrew, very vague and shadowy, but getting closer, more solid-looking all the time, just as if he were coming into focus. But before he could become quite real, Polly shouted change, and they did change, and our world faded away like a dream, and the green light above grew stronger and stronger, till their heads came out of the pool, and they scrambled ashore. And there was the wood all about them, as green and bright and still as ever. The whole thing had taken less than a minute. There, said Diggory, that's all right. Now for the adventure. Any pool will do. Come on, let's try this one. Stop, said Polly. Aren't we going to mark this pool? They stared at each other and turned quite white as they realized the dreadful thing that Diggory had just been going to do. For there were as many number of pools in the wood, and the pools were all alike, and the trees were all alike, so that if they had once left behind that pool that led to their own world without making some sort of landmark, the chances have been 100 to 1 against their ever finding it again. Diggory's hand was shaking as he opened his penknife and cut out a long strip of turf on the bank of the pool. The soil, which smelled nice, was of a rich reddish brown and showed up well against the green. It's a good thing one of us had some sense, said Polly. Well, don't keep on gassing about this, said Diggory. Come along. I want to see what's on the other pools. And Polly gave him a pretty sharp answer, and he said something even nastier in reply. The quarrel lasted for several minutes, but it would be dull to write it all down. Let us skip on to the moment at which they stood with beating hearts and rather scared faces on the edge of the unknown pool with their yellow rings, and held hands, and once more said 1, 2, 3, go! Splash. Once again it hadn't worked. This pool, too, appeared to be only a puddle. Instead of reaching a new world, they only got their feet wet and splashed their legs for the second time that morning. If it was a morning, it seems to be always the same time in the wood between the worlds. Blast and bothering, exclaimed Diggory. What's gone wrong now? We put our yellow rings on all right. He said yellow for the outward journey. Now the truth was that Uncle Andrew, who knew nothing about the wood between the worlds, had quite a wrong idea about the rings. The yellow ones weren't outward rings, and the green ones weren't homeward rings. At least, not in the way he thought. The stuff on which both were made had all come from the wood. The stuff in the yellow rings had the picture of drawing you into the wood, had the power of drawing you into the wood. It was stuff that wanted to get back to its own place, the in-between place. But the stuff in the green ring is stuff that is trying to get out of its own place. So a green ring would take you out of the wood into a world. Uncle Andrew, you see, was working with things he did not really understand. Most magicians are. Of course, Diggory did not realize the truth quite clearly either, or not until later. But when they had talked it over, they decided to try the green rings on the new pool, just to see what happened. I'm game if you are, said Polly. But she really said this because, in her heart of hearts, she now felt sure that neither kind of ring was going to work at all in the new pool, and so there was nothing worse to be afraid of than another splash. I am not quite sure that Diggory had not the same feeling. At any rate, when they had both put on their greens and come back to the edge of the water and taken hands again, they were certainly a good deal more cheerful and less solemn than they had been the first time. 1, 2, 3, go, said Diggory, and they jumped. That's the end of chapter 3. Is there anyone still here watching? Get some water to drink. Alright. Got plenty of water. Alright. Chapter 4. The Bell and the Hammer. There was no doubt about the magic this time. Down and down they rushed, first through darkness and then through a mass of vague and whirling shapes, which might have been almost anything. It grew lighter. Then suddenly they felt that they were standing on something solid. A moment later, everything came into focus, and they were able to look about them. What a weird place, said Diggory. I don't like it, said Polly, with something like a shudder. What they noticed first was the light. It wasn't like sunlight, and it wasn't like electric light, or lamps, or candles, or any other light they had ever seen. It was dull, rather red, not at all cheerful. It was steady and did not flicker. They were standing on a flat paved surface, and building rose all around them. They were in a sort of courtyard. The sky was extraordinarily dark, a blue that was almost black. When you had seen that sky, you wondered that there should be any light at all. It's very funny weather here, said Diggory. I wonder if we've arrived just in time for a thunderstorm or an eclipse. I don't like it, said Polly. Both of them, without knowing why, were talking in whispers, and though there was no reason why they should still go on holding hands after their jumping, they didn't let go. The walls rose very high all around that courtyard. They had many great windows in them, windows without glass, through which you saw nothing but black darkness. Lower down, there were great pillared arches, yawning blackly like the mouths of railway tunnels. It was rather cold. No, shoot, one second. Let me check something. Alright, that seems in check. Here. Okay, come on. Alright, let's come here. Let's see. Alright, let's see. Here. And here. Alright. Let's see. Black Lake, mouth of the railway tunnels. The stone of which everything was built seemed to be red, but that might only be because of the curious light. It was obviously very old. Many of the flat stones that paved the courtyard had cracks around them. None of them fitted closely together, and the sharp corners were all worn off. One of the arched doorways was half filled up with rubble. The two children kept on turning round and round to look at the different sides of the courtyard. One reason was that they were afraid of somebody, or something, looking out those windows at them with their backs when their backs were turned. "Do you think anyone lives here?" said Diggory at last, still in the whisper. "No," said Polly. "It's all in ruins. We haven't heard a sound since we came." "Let's stand still and listen for a bit," suggested Diggory. They stood still and listened, but all they could hear was the thumping thump of their own hearts. This place was at least quiet as the wood between the worlds, but it was a different kind of quietness. The silence of the wood had been rich and warm. You could almost hear the trees growing and full of life. This was a dead, cold, empty silence. You couldn't imagine anything growing in it. "Let's go home," said Polly. "But we haven't seen anything yet," said Diggory. "Now that we're here, we simply must have a look around." "I'm sure there's nothing at all interesting here. There's not much point in finding a magic ring that lets you into other worlds if you're afraid to look at them when you've got here." "Who's talking about being afraid?" said Polly, letting go of Diggory's hand. "I only thought you didn't seem very keen on exploring this place." "I'll go anywhere you go. We can get away the moment we want to," said Diggory. "Let's take off our green rings and put them in our right-hand pockets. All we've got is to remember that our yellow pockets are in our left-hand pockets. You can keep your hand as near your pocket as you like, but don't put it on, or you'll touch your yellow and vanish." They did this and went quietly up to one of the big arched doorways which led into the inside of the building. And then they stood on the threshold and could look in. They saw it was not so dark inside as they had thought at first. It led into a vast shadowy hall, which appeared to be empty. But on the far side there was a row of pillars with arches between them, and though those arches were streamed in much more of the same tired-looking light, they crossed the hall, walking carefully for fear of holes in the floor or of anything laying about what they might trip over. It seemed like a long walk. When they had reached the other side, they came out through the arches and found themselves in another and larger courtyard. "That doesn't look very safe," said Polly, pointing at a place where the wall budged outward and looked as if it were ready to fall over into the courtyard. In one place a pillar was missing between two arches, and the bit that came down to where the top of the pillar ought to have been hung there with nothing to support it. Clearly, this place had been deserted for hundreds, perhaps even thousands of years. "If it's lasted till now, I suppose it'll last a bit longer," said Diggory. "But we must be very quiet. You know a noise sometimes brings things down, like an avalanche in the Alps." They went out of that courtyard into another doorway, and up a great flight of steps, and through vast rooms that opened out of one another till you were dizzy with the mere size of the place. Every now and then they thought they were going to get into the open and see what sort of country lay around the enormous palace, but each time they only got into another courtyard. They must have been magnificent places when people were still living there, and one there had been a fountain. A great stone monster with widespread wings stood with its mouth open, and you could still see a bit of piping in the back of its mouth, out of which the water used to pour. Under it was a wide stone basin to hold the water, but it was as dry as a bone. In other places there were the dry sticks of some sort of climbing plant which had wound itself around the pillars and helped to pull some of them down, but it had died long ago. And there were no ants or spiders or any of other things living you might expect to see in a ruin, and where the dry earth showed between the broken flagstones there was no grass or moss. It was all so dreary and all so much the same that even Diggory was thinking they had better put on their yellow rings and get back to the warm green living forest of the in-between place, when they came into two huge doors of some metal that might possibly be gold. One stood a little ajar, so of course they wanted to look in. Both started back and drew a long breath, for here at last there was something worth seeing. Wait 1 second. Oh, skip pad, please. Okay. It was all so dreary, and no, wait, no, something worse. For a second, they thought the room was full of people. Hundreds of people, all seated and all perfectly still. Polly and Diggory, as you may guess, stood perfectly still themselves for a good long time, looking in, but presently they decided that what they were looking at could not be the real people. There was not a movement nor the sound of a breath among them all. They were like the most wonderful waxworks you ever saw. This time Polly took the lead. There was something in this room which interested her more than it interested Diggory. All the figures were wearing magnificent clothes. If you were interested in clothes at all, you could hardly help going in to see them closer, and the blaze of their colors made this room look not exactly cheerful, but at any rate rich and majestic after all the dust and emptiness of the others. It had more windows too, and was a good deal lighter. I could hardly describe the clothes. The figures were all robed and had crowns on their heads. Their robes were crimson and silvery gray, and deep purple and vivid green. And there were patterns and pictures of flowers and strange beasts and needlework all over them. Precious stones of astonishing size and brightness stared from their crowns and hung in chains around their necks, and peeped out from all the places where anything was fastened. "Why haven't these clothes all rotted away long ago?" asked Polly. "Magic," whispered Diggory. "Can't you feel it? I bet this whole room is just stiff with enchantments. I can feel it the moment we came in." "Any one of these dresses could cost hundreds of pounds," said Polly. But Diggory was more interested in the faces, and indeed these were well worth looking at. The people sat in their stone chairs on each side of the room, and the floor was left free down the middle. You could walk down and look at the faces in turn. "They were nice people, I think," said Diggory. Polly nodded. All the faces they could see were certainly nice. Both the women and men looked kind and wise, and they seemed to come of a handsome race. But after the children had gone down a few steps, they came to faces that looked a little different. There were some very solemn faces. You felt you'd have to mind your P's and Q's if you ever met living people who looked like that. When they had gone a little further, they found themselves among faces they didn't like. This was about the middle of the room. The faces were very strong and proud and happy, but they looked cruel. A little further on, they looked crueler. Further on again, they were still cruel, but they no longer looked happy. There were even despairing faces, as if the people they belonged to had done dreadful things, and also suffered dreadful things. The last figure of all was the most interesting, a woman even more richly dressed than the others, very tall, but each figure in the room was taller than the people of our world, with a look of such fierceness and pride that it took your breath away. Yet she was beautiful, too. Years afterwards, when he was an old man, Diggory said he had never in all his life known a woman so beautiful. It was only fair to add that Polly always said she couldn't see anything specifically beautiful about her. This woman, as I said, was the last, but there were plenty of empty chairs beyond her, as if the room had been intended for a much larger collection of images. "I do wish we knew the story behind all this," said Diggory. "Let's go back and look at the table sort of thing in the middle of the room." The thing in the middle of the room was not exactly a table. It was a square pillar, about 4 feet high, and on it there rose a little golden arch from which there hung a little golden bell, and beside there lay a little golden hammer to hit the bell with. "I wonder," said Diggory. "There seems to be something written here," said Polly, stooping down and looking at the side of the pillar. "By gum, so there is," said Diggory. "But of course we shan't be able to read it, shan't we?" "I'm not so sure," said Polly. They both looked at it hard, and as you might have expected, the letters cut in the stone were strange. But now a great wonder happened, for as they looked, though the shape of the strange letters never altered, they found that they could understand them. If only Diggory had remembered what he himself had said a few minutes ago, that this was an enchanted room. He might have guessed that the enchantment was beginning to work, but he was too wild with curiosity to think about that. He was longing more and more to know what was written on the pillar, and very soon they both knew. What it said was something like this. At least this is the sense of it, though the poetry, when you read it, was better. Make your choice, adventurous stranger. Strike the bell and buy the danger, or wonder till it drives you mad what would have followed if you had. No fear, said Polly. We don't want any danger. Oh, but don't you see it's no good, said Diggory. We can't get out of it now. We shall always be wondering what else would have happened if we had struck the bell. I'm not going home to be driven mad by always thinking of that. No fear. Don't be so silly, said Polly, as if anyone would. What does it matter what would have happened? I expect anyone who's come as far as this is bound to go on wondering till it sends him dotty. That's the magic of it, you see. I can feel it beginning to work on me already. Well, I don't, said Polly crossly, and I don't believe you do either. You're just putting it on. That's all you know, said Diggory. It's because you're a girl. Girls never want to know anything with gossip and rot about people getting engaged. Jeez. You look exactly like your uncle when you said that, said Polly. Why can't you keep it to the point, said Diggory. What we're talking about is, how exactly like a man, said Polly, in a very grown-up voice, but she added hastily in her real voice. And don't say I'm just like a woman, or you'll be a beastly copycat. I should never dream of calling a kid like you a woman, said Diggory loftily. Oh, I'm a kid, am I? Said Polly, who was now in real rage. Well, you needn't be bothered by having a kid with you any longer then. I'm off. I've had enough of this place. And I've had enough of you too, you beastly stuck-up, obstinate pig. None of that, said Diggory, in a voice even nastier than he meant it to be, for he saw Polly's hand moving to her pocket to get hold of her yellow ring. I can't excuse what he did next, except by saying that he was very sorry for it afterwards, and so were very good many other people. Before Polly's hand reached her pocket, he grabbed her wrist, leaning across with his back against her chest. Then, keeping her other arm out of the way with his other elbow, he leaned forward, picked up the hammer, and struck the golden bell with a little smart tap. Then he let her go, and they fell apart, staring at each other and breathing hard. Polly was just beginning to cry, not with fear, and not even because he had hurt her wrist quite badly, but with furious anger. With 2 seconds, however, they had something to say. As soon as the bell was open, they could not have heard one another even by shouting. And soon it grew, all at one note, a continuous sweet sound, though the sweetness had throbbing with it, and they could feel the stone floor trembling under their feet. Then at last it began to be mixed with another sound, a vague, disastrous noise, which sounded first like the roar of a distant train, and then like the crash of a falling tree. They heard something like great weights falling. Finally, with a sudden rush and thunder, and a shape that nearly flung them off their feet, about a quarter of the roof at one end of the room fell in. Great blocks of masonry fell all around them, and the walls rocked. The noise of the bells stopped. The clouds of the dust cleared away. Everything became quiet again. It was never found out whether the fall of the roof was due to magic, or whether the unbearably loud sound from the bell just happened to strike the note, which was more than those crumbling walls could stand. There, I hope you're satisfied now, panted Polly. Well, it's all over anyway, said Diggory, and both thought it was, but they had never been more mistaken in their lives. Chapter 5. Alright, or watcher time. I just want coffee while I'm at it too. Let's see. Okay. That was kind of loud. Alright, now coffee. Chapter 5, The Deplorable World. Ads. What the fuck? Trembling, though it no longer gave out any note. Suddenly they heard a soft noise from the end of the room, which was still undamaged. They turned as quick as lightning to see what it was. One of the robed figures, the furthest off one of all, the woman who Diggory realized that he thought was so beautiful, rose from its chair. When she stood up, they realized that she was even taller than they had thought, and you could see at once, not only from her crown and robes, but from the flash of her eyes and the curve of her lips, that she was a great queen. She looked around the room and saw the damage and saw the children, but you could not guess from her face what she thought of either, or whether she was surprised. She came forward with long, swift strides. "Who has awakened me?" she asked. "I think it must have been me," said Diggory. "You," said the queen, laying her hand on his shoulder. A white, beautiful hand, but Diggory could feel that it was strong, like steel pincers. "You? But you are only a child, a common child. Anyone can see at a glance that you have no drop of royal or noble blood in your veins. How did such as you dare to enter this house?" "We've come from another world by magic," said Polly, who thought it was high time the queen took some notice of her as well as Diggory. "Is this true?" said the queen, still looking at Diggory, and not giving Polly even a glance. "Yes, it is," said he. The queen put her other hand under his chin and forced it up so she could see his face better. Diggory tried to stare back, but he soon had to let his eyes drop. There was something about hers that overpowered him. "Is this the witch from the Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe?" After she had studied him for well over a minute, she let go of his chin and said, "You are no magician. The mark of it is not on you. You must be the only servant of magic. It is on another magic that you have traveled here." "It was my Uncle Andrew," said Diggory. At that moment, not in the room itself, but from somewhere very close, there came first a rumbling, then a creaking, and then a roar of falling masonry, and the floor shook. "There is a great peril here," said the queen. "The whole palace is breaking up. If we are not out of it in a few minutes, we shall be buried under the ruin." She spoke as calmly as if she had been merely mentioning the time of day. "Come," she added, and held out a hand to each of the children. Polly, who was disliking the queen and feeling rather sulky, would not have let her hand be taken if she could have helped it. But though the queen spoke so calmly, her movements were as quick as thought. Before Polly knew what was happening, her left hand had been caught in a hand so much larger and stronger than her own that she could do nothing about it. "This is a terrible woman," thought Polly. "She's strong enough to break my arm with one twist. And now that she's got my left hand, I can't get my yellow ring. If I try to stretch across and get my right hand into my left pocket, I mightn't be able to reach it before she asked what I was doing. Whatever happens, we mustn't let her know about the rings. I do hope Diggory has the sense to keep his mouth shut. I wish I could get a word with him alone." The queen led them out of the hall of images into a long corridor, and then through a whole maze of halls and stairways and courtyards. Again and again they heard parts of the great palace collapsing, sometimes quite close to them. Once a huge arch came thundering down only a moment after they had passed through it. The queen was walking quickly. The children had to trot to keep up with her, but she showed no sign of fear. Diggory thought, "She's wonderfully brave and strong. She's what I call a queen. I do hope she's going to tell us the story of this place." She did tell them certain things as they went along. "That is the door to the dungeon," she would say, or "that is the passage that leads to the principal torture chambers," or "this is the old banqueting hall where my great-grandfather bade several hundred nobles to feast, and killed them all before they had drunk their fill. They had had rebellious thoughts." Jeez. They came at last into a hall longer and loftier than any they had yet seen. From its size, from the great doors at the far end, Diggory thought that now at last they could be coming onto the main entrance. In this he was quite right. The doors were dead black, either ebony or some black metal, which is not found in our world. They were fastened with great bars, most of them too high to reach and all too heavy to lift. He wondered how they could get out. The queen let go of his hand and raised her arm. She drew herself up to her full height and stood rigid. There she said something which they couldn't understand, but it sounded horrid, and made an action as if they were throwing something towards the doors. And those high and heavy doors trembled for a second, as if they were made of silk, and then crumbled away till there was nothing left of them but a heap of dust on the threshold. "Phew!" whistled Diggory. "Has your master magician, your uncle, power like mine?" asked the queen, firmly seizing Diggory's hand again. "In the meantime, remember what you have seen. This is what happens to things and to people." Much more light than they had yet seen in this country was pouring in through the now empty doorway, and when the queen led them out through it, they were not surprised to find themselves in the open air. The wind that blew in their faces was cold, yet somehow stale. They were looking for a high terrace, and there was a great landscape out below them. Low down and near the horizon hung a great red sun, far bigger than our sun. Diggory felt at once that this was also older than ours, a sun near the end of its life, weary of looking down upon the world. To the left of the sun and higher up there was a single star, big and bright. Those were the only two things to be seen in the dark sky. They made a dismal group. And on the earth, in every direction, as far as the eye could reach, there spread a vast city, in which there was no living thing to be seen. And all the temples, towers, palaces, pyramids, and bridges cast long, disastrous-looking shadows in the light of that withered sun. Once a great river had flowed through the city, but the water had long since vanished, and where there was now only a wide ditch of grey dust. "Look well at that which none will ever see again," said the queen. "Such a charm, that great city, the city of the King of Kings, the wonder of the world, perhaps of all worlds. Does your uncle rule any city as great as this boy?" "No," said Diggory. He was going to explain that Uncle Andrew didn't rule any cities, but the queen went on. "Not bad. Skip." It is silent now, but I have stood here with the whole air was full of charm. The trampling of feet, the creaking of wheels, the cracking of the whips, and the groaning of slaves with the thunder of chariots, and the sacrificial drums beating in the temples. I have stood here, but it was near the end, when the roar of battle went up from every street, and the river of Charn ran red. She paused and added, "All in one moment, one woman blotted it out forever." "Who?" said Diggory, said in a faint voice, but he had already guessed the answer. "I," said the queen. "I, Jadis, the last queen, but the queen of the world." The two children stood silent, shivering in the cold wind. "It was my sister's fault," said the queen. "She drove me to it. May the curse of all the powers rest upon her forever. At any moment I was ready to make peace, yes, and to spare her life too, if only she would yield me the throne, but she would not. Her pride has destroyed the whole world, Even after the war had begun, there was a solemn promise that neither side would use magic. But when she broke her promise, what should I do? Fool! As if she did not know that I had more magic than she. She even knew that I had the secret of the deplorable world. Did she think she was always a weakling? That I would not use it? What was it? Said Diggory. That is the secret of secrets, said the Queen Jadis. It had long been known to the great kings of our race that there was a word which, if spoken with the proper ceremonies, would destroy all living things except to the one who spoke it. But the ancient kings were weak and soft-hearted, and bound themselves to all who should come after them with great oaths, never even to seek after the knowledge of that word. But I learned it in a secret place, and paid a terrible price to learn it. I did not use it until she forced me to it. I fought to overcome her by every other means. I poured out the blood of my armies like water. Beast, muttered Polly. The last great battle, said the Queen, raged for 3 days here in Charn itself. For 3 days I looked upon it from this very spot. I did not use my power till the last of my soldiers had fallen, and the accursed woman, my sister, at the head of her rebels, was halfway up those great stairs that led from the city to the terrace. Then I waited till we were so close that we could see each other's faces. She flashed her horrible wicked eyes upon me and said, "Victory." "Yes," said I, "victory, but not yours." Then I spoke the deplorable word. A moment later, I was the only living thing beneath the sun. "But the people?" asked Diggory. "What people, boy?" said the Queen. "All the ordinary people," said Polly, "who had never done you any harm, and the women, and the children, and the animals." "Don't you understand?" said the Queen, still speaking to Diggory. "I was the Queen. They were my people. What else were they there, what else were they there for but to do my will?" "It was rather hard luck on them all the same," said he. "I had forgotten that you were only a common boy. How could you understand the reasons of state? You must learn, child, that what would be a wrong for you or for any of the common people is not wrong in a great queen such as I. The weight of the world is on our shoulders. We must be freed from all rules. Ours is a high and lonely destiny." Diggory suddenly remembered that Uncle Andrew had used exactly the same words, but they sounded much grander when Queen Jadis said them. Perhaps because Uncle Andrew was not 7 feet tall and dazzlingly beautiful. "And what did you do then?" said Diggory. "I had already cast strong spells on the hall where the images of my ancestors sit, and the force of those spells was that I should sleep among them like an image myself, and need neither food nor fire, though it were 1,000 years, till one came up and struck the bell and awoke me." "The deplorable word that made the sun like that?" asked Diggory. "Like what?" said Jadis. "So big, so always has been," said Jadis, "at least for hundreds of thousands of years. Have you a different sun in your world?" "Yes, it's smaller and yellower. It gives a good deal more heat." The Queen gave a long-drawn "ah," and Diggory saw in her face that same hungry and greedy look which he had lately seen on Uncle Andrew's. "So," she said, "yours is a much younger world." She paused a moment to look more at the deserted city, and if she was sorry for all the evil she had done there, she certainly didn't show it, and then said, "Now let us be going. It is cold here at the end of all the ages." "Going where?" asked both the children. "Where?" repeated Jadis in surprise. "To your world, of course." Polly and Diggory looked at each other aghast. Polly had disliked the Queen from the first, and even Diggory, now that he had heard the story, felt that he had seen quite as much of her as he wanted. Certainly she was not all the sort of person one would like to take home, and if they did they didn't know how they could. What they wanted was to get away themselves, but Polly couldn't get at her ring, and of course Diggory couldn't go without her. Diggory got very red in the face and stammered, Oh, our world. I didn't know you wanted to go there." "What else were you sent here for, if not to fetch me?" asked Jadis. I'm sure you wouldn't like our world at all, said Diggory. It's not her sort of place, is it, Polly? It's very dull, and not worth seeing, really. It will soon be worth seeing when I rule it, answered the Queen. Oh, but you can't, said Diggory. It's not like that. They wouldn't let you, you know. The Queen gave a contemptuous smile. Many great kings, she said, thought they could stand against the House of Carn, but they all fell, and their very names are forgotten. Foolish boy, do you think that I, with my beauty and my magic, will not have your whole world at my feet before a year has passed? Prepare your incantations and take me there at once. This is perfectly frightful, said Diggory to Polly. Perhaps your fear for this uncle of yours, said Jadis. But if he honors me duly, he shall keep his life and his throne. I am not coming to fight against him. He must be a very great magician, if he was found how to send you here. Is he the king of your world, or only of part? He isn't king of anywhere, said Diggory. You are lying, said the Queen. Does not magic always go with the royal blood? Who ever heard of common people being magicians? I can see the truth whether you speak it or not. Your uncle is the great king and great enchanter of your world, and by his art he has seen the shadow of my face in some magic mirror, or some enchanted pool, and for the love of my beauty he made a potent spell which shook your world to its foundations, and sent you across the vast gulf between our world and the world to ask my favor to bring me to him. Answer me, is this not how it was? Not exactly, said Diggory. Not exactly, shouted Polly. Why, it's absolutely bosh from beginning to end. Minions! Cried the Queen, turning in rage upon Polly and seizing her hair at the very top of her head where it hurt the most. But in doing so, she let go of both the children's hands. Now! Shouted Diggory. And quick! Shouted Polly. They plunged their left hands into their pockets. They did not need to put the rings on. The moment they touched them, the whole part of that dreary world vanished from their eyes. They were rushing upward, and warm green light was growing near overhead. Okay. Oh, that's a lot of pages. Okay, so how many chapters did I read today? Let's see. There's I read 2 last night, so now we're on chapter 6. Dang. That is a good spot to stop it again. Alright. Alright. I want to end stream now. Thanks for joining, everybody. Oh, wait. No. Should I? Yeah.